Well, hello, y'all listeners and speakers. This is Andy Cleff, and we are doing a cold open. We tried to script it. That fell on deaf ears. We're just going. I'm going to hand the speaking stick over to Claudia because, she made this happen.
Hey everyone. Well, I don't know if I made it happen. We were just saying MG was our muse. So she brought the topic to the Discord, and then it just somehow took a mind of its own, and here we are. So it's been a while since we've done a panel anyway. And I miss talking to you people in person. Well, kind of.
Yeah, and Mike joined in. Mike Cadell, nice to see your face.
Hey, Claudia, I got a question for you. If this podcast were to go exactly the way you imagine it, it would be like what?
It would be like me just speaking to my peers, to my colleagues. It'd be like what happens in the Discord, except with faces.
Wait, it would be just like what happens in Discord with faces, and we're all in the same pub after work,
I love
sitting
it.
in the alcove, having a pint or two. Yin?
I'm in.
I can get down with that.
MG, welcome. Is this your first Agile Uprising podcast?
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Claudia from and Mike. I know you folks because I keep chatting with you of late to take suggestion and cues and whatnot. But yeah, thanks for inviting me.
It's so great to see everybody's faces. I second that, Claudia. What was the topic? MG, what started all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not from somewhere or very contextual, but of late, I would say varied experiences over the years. And then I see that you talk about personal, you talk about professional. People aren't okay-ish to open up about conflicts, right? And then, of course, the rest is history, right? So one thing leads to another. But I have been struggling just to assess myself also. Where do I lie with the conflict? Because I do a lot of reading, Lisa Atkins and other authors, and that keeps me going with the momentum. But yeah, I mean, if I would love to hear from you and your Claudia or Mike, that how would you feel that you were in a situation where conflict is around you, circumferencing you, and then you don't know where to go and how to come out of that?
Yeah, conflict. It's everywhere. And I don't know that it's the conflict itself isn't the problem. It's how we and the rest in it handle it. And it can go a lot of different ways.
And the stories we tell ourselves as it's arising.
Right. I was starting to think, oh, well, it's interesting because I'm not in it. So I was having a harder time responding to you. And then the second that I was thinking, oh, I'm having a hard time, it just started popping up everywhere at work. So Scrum Masters that I was working with, they started to come, oh, I've got this situation and I'm not really sure how to address it with this person and this person. Oh, and then there are these people, but they don't really see it. So I just kept on coming back to MG's comments about, well, what if they don't think that they have a problem? So it was really interesting because as soon as you raised it, then I started seeing it everywhere.
And Claudia, can I pull on a bit of a thread there?
Pull away.
I heard conflict and problem being equated. Did I hear that the way you intended?
Good. Go on. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. So I'll offer this perspective that conflict is data. It's the human system is trying to speak, and it's speaking because something is not as it should be, or as members want it to be. So that when conflict arises, it's to an inquisitive person, it can be data, and then it's our choices to how we respond when when we become aware of that conflict. There's productive conflict, and I would argue, at the risk of over labeling, unproductive conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seemed to be where your mind was going, or at least your mind map, Andy.
Yeah, and I love the rule of threes, right? So it's good conflict, it's bad conflict, or we don't know what kind of conflict it is. In your case, Claudia, you were like, I don't know, is this good, healthy, productive conflict? How can I offer suggestions if I'm in this unknowing state, this confused state of, yes, so there's conflict. Is it good, bad, or I don't know? And I think we have to respond to each of those categories, good, bad, and unclear, in subtly different ways to navigate.
I I want to come back to it's the data, and then there's going to be the interpretation of the data. So MG, in the situation that you were in, how were you interpreting the data? Because it sounded like you were seeing things one way, but the team that you were working with wasn't necessarily, or the people that you were working with wasn't necessarily seeing or interpreting the same way. So what were you seeing?
I would say, Claudia, I think that the data stuff is important. I like the word which Mike used. Inevitably for me, it all started because no, I said I'm talking about a couple of years back. So I didn't knew at that point in time that I was in a conflict, to be very precise. So I was trying to do my self reflection, say, okay, is it true or am I thinking too much? You know how it happens typically, right? So when I'm closing my day and then over a weekend, I was like, okay, no, I'm just overthinking. And because at times I do overthink because maybe for whatever reasons, but I thought that okay, probably if somebody would help me that I don't know this unclear zone, or probably I could get more light to this unclear zone, probably I might navigate it better. But I would say, Claudia, I didn't have the data or probably the proper data to analyze further. Yeah, so probably that was my conflict initially. I don't know how to put it together, and that was challenging for me. And couple of months, I was trying to brood myself, say, "Oh no, come on, let me stop thinking and do my work." Right? That's how it is.
There's a couple of models that came up in our conversation and then also in my brain. So you had mentioned Lisa Atkins, and that's one way that I have learned to see, feel, hear
Mhm.
different kinds of conflicts. So she describes the different levels and what's going on. And there's, I'm sure in her book, it's been a while since I read it, she says, you'll hear this
Mhm.
you or you're wrong. And they're like, that's data, what level you're at. Mike, you brought in a model. Is it from Orsk, the toxins, or is that from a different place? Could you talk a little bit about that? And are they always present in bad conflict, or do they ever have a good side in a healthy, constructive conflict?
So the model that I mentioned in the chat was team toxins. Also, some may know it as the four horsemen in relationships. That's grounded in John Gottman's work on relationships and marriage. And so Orsk has adopted that and brought it into a tool that you can use. And so it's referred to as the four team toxins. And that's for those that may not be familiar, blaming, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. So these are behaviors that are present in just about every human relationship, whether it's you and your partner, your friend, your spouse, or a team or whatever. So they're there. What I've found useful is educating the team about this reality, making them aware, so then they then have a tool to be self-aware and to kind of hold each other accountable and saying, hey, you're stonewalling now. What do we have to do to work with that? So it's not denying the inevitable, it's making it visible, revealing the system to itself, and then figuring out how to work with it.
I can see that going so bad in some teams. You're stonewalling. No, you're being defensive. Oh, the hell with you. You're right.
Yeah. And then as a system coach, you step back and you observe that and say, what's happening here?
I like that comment of well, revealing systems to itself. So making people aware that it's there, but that also it brings me back to two things is one, what are you seeing or hearing that's making you as the coach or the scrum master or the whoever say, this is conflict, or I think this is conflict. And what are you seeing or hearing within the team? So are they aware that there is conflict? And I think, MG, you were saying that in your scenario, you saw something the team didn't see it or wasn't calling it that.
Yeah, they weren't calling it that. I think I like that word. So, I mean, sentence, I would say, or however. I think the awareness factor is of paramount importance, meaning people don't are not aware, or probably if they are, they don't accept it. So they're in a denial mode, I would say, right? So, what do you do when they're in denial mode? What should be done at the point in time?
I just want to go back to one thing that, in my mind, conflict as a word could be good, bad, or you don't know. Claudia, the way you mentioned it, it felt to me like you were implying that it's unhealthy,
Right, right, because it could be.
and I don't think it is. It could be. It definitely there is plenty of unhealthy conflict, and there's also healthy conflict, which could be problem solving through debate, and to an outsider that looks at it and be like, shit, they're going at it. That's conflict.
Right,
I better stop that. But the team might be, no, this is just the way we problem solve. And suddenly it's like, are we problem solving? And it's just, loud and noisy. But what comes out at the end is a gem that's been polished by the process. That is good friction. But there's also bad friction. And the toxins bring it back to mind. People get hurt feelings. They shut down. They don't feel safe. They don't get trust. Trust goes out the window. So, MG, back to you.
Yep.
What was it? Was it just problem solving in a way that felt uncomfortable to you, the observer, or was it conflict that was potentially or actually bad conflict that the team couldn't see?
I think after a couple of years when I started to observe, and I did talk to a few people and then getting things around, I did my own research. I think initially I was like, as I said, right, I was quite naive to understand that it could have been a problem solving. But yeah, the couple of instances I'm mentioning, there are a couple of them, right? Not one or two, a couple of them, or more than a couple, right? So yes, problem solving was one, Andy, as you rightly mentioned. But then how, as an outsider, how do I immediately gauge? Is I would like to understand from each of you that, okay, this is problem solving. Hey, I take a step back and they're all doing fine, and a gem is going to come back, right? So, or come out of the conversation, or eventually. So, how do I know? Just to enrich my understanding, that how do I know it's their problem solving? So, as I said, right? So, eventually it turned out to be problem solving, but I was like, can I come in between and help you guys, right? So, something like that.
Yeah, the listeners can't see this, but as MG is speaking, all of us, like, we have a finger of like, oh, I get it, and I've got something on that.
We need to use the hand raise, and whoever gets the hand up first in Zoom gets the right of first for refusal.
Yeah.
Mike, that stimulated some thoughts for you.
Yes. The overarching theme that comes to mind, MG, as I'm listening to you, is the best thing that I've learned to do is simply to ask this team, ask the human system, what's going on. So by simply stating in very neutral terms, hey, I'm feeling something. So you're being clear, this is what I'm feeling. What is this like from your all's perspective? And obviously use the words that are authentic to you, but by simply just pausing and revealing the system back to itself, it provides a space where the team can then help you understand what their story is, or if it's a conflict that's brewing, you're making a space for that to come to the surface and be addressed if they choose to.
Yeah, I like that. And I think there's a prerequisite, Mike, is you need to have a shared language, shared vocabulary, and and as good as you can get as a shared understanding of what those words mean, right? You say a conflict, I say problem, but if you begin to get deeper, and as an observer, I'm hearing some, give it a name, name it. I'm hearing some what I perceive to be personal attacks here. Are you all okay with that?
Yeah. And you have to be careful to own that interpretation for you and not put your perception on the people that you're talking to. Because what I hear Andy and Claudia talking, and I think Claudia is just wearing Andy out with personal attacks. They're actually having fun ribbing each other. If I take on, if I impose on them my interpretation, I could be wrong and be unhelpful.
Right. That makes me think of the way that I try to go about it is I try and actually preempt it. So that I know, so that the team knows, how do we communicate and how do we disagree? Because it doesn't, like we were all saying, it doesn't, just because there is disagreement, there is debate, that doesn't mean that it's unhealthy or unproductive conflict. Maybe that's just the way that we disagree. That's just the way that we reach some sort of agreement or conclusion when we've got different opinions. So I know that I try and preempt it with teams, either in their working agreement
Ah,
or especially with teams that have that are in different locations. So in teams where people are in different locations, either because they're not physically together or because culturally we're not on the
Mm.
same wavelength, how do we like to communicate, or how do we want to communicate? So some people may be very direct, other people will be very polite, some people might be very blunt. So how do we like to communicate? And if I'm being very frank with you, are you going to interpret that as me being rude or disrespectful? So that's one way to have that conversation beforehand. And in the case where we disagree, how do we want to disagree? Okay, well, if we're disagreeing, then maybe in some situations people just want to have at it and figure things out. And in other situations, or with other people, or if you're bringing somebody new into the mix, we want to call it out first, and then each person will go away and think about it and come back when we're ready to address it together. Because some people might not react well in the moment, whereas other people like full on challenging in the moment. I went through an exercise recently with teams where we were going through, okay, how do we put words to the way that we communicate? How do we put words to the way that we disagree and decide? And one team said, and I wouldn't have suspected it from them, but they said, well, we challenge by nature. So sometimes it might seem like we're fighting, but that's just our process. That is how we reach agreement. And then once we actually reach the decision, there's no more debate because we've reached that decision. So we just get past it.
There's a hot take. No team working agreement is complete without a section on how you behave when you disagree.
Right.
exactly. And I want to keep going on that working agreement. So, MG, back to you. And if you're in a team situation, it's an opportunity to pull that working agreement out and say, do we have that section that Mike talked about? And are we honoring it? Some teams have, I love a lot an improv. Uh, Practicing some improv and doing a yes but and a yes and experiment, right? Or well, maybe we'll talk about Cantor's four roles and like, let's plan lunch and you be the mover and you be the follower and you be the observer and you be the opposer and see what happens and make it playful to go back and reinvestigate the working agreements and to bring in some of what Mike talked about, toxins. I mean, maybe there's a healthy side to some of those or an antidote to some of those that becomes, if everybody knows that when push comes to shove, Andy shows up with contempt, right? Now we have a working agreement. Feels to me like you're being contemptuous. Could you find a little bit more curiosity? Well, maybe that's a little too snarky, but you know,
It is.
but some of you ORS trained people can find a way to say it, right? I'm hearing a lot of contempt. What might be a different way to approach this? Blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. How about
Yeah.
curiosity?
Yeah.
Do you understand? What do you understand? That sort of
Mhm.
thing. And that becomes the
Yeah.
working agreements. I love that. Many teams don't even have working agreements to begin with, let alone have a section on conflict.
Yeah, I was also listening to all of you while I was trying to reframe something or rephrase it in a better way. So I would say that many a times people fear to choose or they don't know how to choose the right words to put in the agreement. So as we discussed, right? So people might work that way, and it's okay to fight and then come out with a gem. But that how do you put it in a nicer way in a working agreement so that you're not you know what I'm trying to say, right? So you just cannot just
Yeah.
put anything that comes to your mind, but then it has to be in a very nicer way, not as raw, crude. So I struggle at times with that as well. So I don't know. Yeah.
I like using the team's words because it'll resonate a lot more.
Mm.
So let's say even if you backtrack, so if your team doesn't have this agreement to begin with, or
Mm.
if you need to revisit it. So, okay, it looks like we're coming across communication and conflict. How do we want to have disagreement? How do we want to have conflict? And then depending on what they're coming up with, then I try and feed them a scenario. So Andy and Mike were talking about, okay, maybe you can act it out, but I like feeding them a scenario. Okay, so let's pretend that MG and Mike completely disagree on the way that we're going to deliver this thing or what done means. How would they phrase that?
Mm.
And if it's coming up with a blank, then I would give an example that I might find extreme for that team. So MG starts yelling at Mike saying, "This is bullshit. I can't believe that you're proposing this." How do we react to that? Oh, well, that's not okay. We want to have respectful disagreement. Okay, we're jotting that down. So we want to have respectful disagreement.
Mhm.
And what does respectful look like? How do you know it's respectful?
Mm. Quote unquote. Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
I had a team once, and it took a long time. There were two developers that had very strong opinions about a tech stack, right?
Mhm.
And they were at the point of coming to blows, not physically, but through code reviews and snark and comments and things like that. And it was having an impact on the entire team. We were co-located. People felt the tension when the two of them came into a room. It took maybe 4 or 6 weeks for it to come to conclusion. And I knew it came to conclusion because we had a new product owner. The product owners were rotating through teams. And it was our first retrospective. And these two guys at the end of the retrospective, we had given space for kudos and things like that and appreciation. They both kind of at the same time raised their hand. I was like, oh, this is not going to go well.
It's just data, Andy.
And one of them said, this isn't really kudos or appreciation, but I'd like to apologize to the team because I've been such an ass. And the other guy's like, no, I was a bigger ass than you, you know? And I'm like, what is going on here? And the new product owner just went, his jaw dropped, and he looked around the room, and then people just like, we're done, rang the gong, left the room, and he stayed, and he's like, I don't know what just happened, but I like it. I'm glad to be part of this team. So that's how you know that
Yeah.
you've gotten somewhere.
Yeah.
And again, in this case, it took a month, it took 6 weeks. Jeff and Steve, if you're listening, you remember that. It was like years ago, but I remember it still, and just the sense of seeing the conflict discharge itself, the unhealthy conflict discharge itself, but it takes time. But we talk about it. We put it on the table somehow.
Oh, so I like where this is headed because we did talk about how do we define it? How do we interpret the data? How do we make it people aware? Or reveal the system to itself if we want to go Orski. orcsy? I don't know. But then let's say that people are aware, then what happens?
Then your skill as a coach needs to come to the surface to guide the participants to figure out for themselves how to cope with it, how to work with it.
So how would we address it then? And then I've got an annex to that, which
Yeah.
what if I'm not comfortable with conflict? How do I address it?
Ooh, like two parts there. Can I answer the first one?
No. Yes.
At least answer a perspective on the first one. Claudia, you should recognize this because you turned me on to this bit of knowledge. When it's all out on the table, I would ask the question, what would you like to have happen next? Shout out to Caitlin Walker's clean language systemic modeling.
Yeah, I'd like to get the hell out of this team room and just go have a nice cup of coffee somewhere. Is that a possibility?
It is, Andy, but say more about that. What makes you feel that way?
I'm glad he's not my coach. I wouldn't get away with anything.
Yeah, so we're exploring kind of maybe a clean way of, so what would you like to have happen? I would also answer bringing it or raising it and addressing it. I would also probably take that clean route of evidence, inference, and impact. I can never
Correct.
remember which way around, but so this
You got it
is
right.
what I'm seeing, and this is the story that I'm making up about what I'm seeing.
And this is the impact it's having on me.
Right. Which could be an opportunity for people to say, oh no, we're fine. Actually, this is just the way that we debate. We speak loudly in this team. That's just how things go. Or it could be, yeah, every time I speak to this person about this topic, it gets really heated and I don't know what to do with that.
And there's a third one. By being brave and going first, you make it possible for other people to go, yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, but I am feeling just like you, MG.
Yeah. Thank you.
You aren't alone.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Yeah. Yeah.
And so taking that step that Claudia just mentioned is hugely powerful.
I think it's also an easier way of approaching things because if you stay factual, it helps take some of the emotion out of it, especially if I, for instance, am not I'm not saying that I'm not, but if I'm not comfortable with conflict or with disagreement, then if I remain factual, then I'm staying away from that emotional bit, or I'm keeping a safe distance with it. Which does make me think, so when I said MG, you just lit something up in my head and then I started seeing it everywhere. You gave me new glasses.
Right.
I do work with people who are very uncomfortable with conflict. So we have a good working relationship and they've told me I'm not comfortable with conflict. So when I see it in the teams that I work with, I don't necessarily know how to address it. And so sometimes it's not going to be coaching in the moment. It's going to be stepping back, reflecting, maybe having a sounding board, and then figuring out, okay, how do I raise this again in a moment where I'm ready to raise it with the team, in a moment where they're also ready to see it and ready to address it. So that's always a tough place. And lots of people, I think, are in that situation where, hey, I'm not comfortable with conflict and I'm supposed to be helping this team work through it.
I think I have a question on this, or probably I don't not a question, but rather a thought. How long you must wait when you're when you're in such a situation, Claudia? So, what's the duration? What's the tenure? Time flies, right? So,
I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer for that, but I can tell you. So the person who said, I'm not comfortable with conflict, we knew because it was part of our initial conversation of how do we want to work together. So this person came to me and said, I came to me immediately. So it wasn't one of our scheduled chats. It's, hey, I need to talk because there's this situation that I'm really uncomfortable with, and I'm afraid it's going to get worse. So just let this person talk. So talk through it. And then I came in the moment saying, okay, you're not comfortable with conflict. This looks and sounds like conflict. So how do you address it? And it was just giving that person space to say, oh, right, this is something I'm already thinking about it. I'm already analyzing it. I'm already thinking of how to approach it, given the team, given the context. And how do I bring it up? It just happened this morning. When do I bring it up and how do I bring it up? So this person's solution was, I need to sleep on it because I'm not ready to talk about it now. So I'm going to send the person a message saying, hey, not happy with the way we ended things. Let's talk about it tomorrow morning. So it did address it pretty close to when it happened. It gave that person space to come back to it, and it gave the other person kind of an advance warning to say, hey, we're going to talk about it. In the end, it worked out well because both people were feeling uncomfortable with the situation, and it was a pretty easy conversation because I happened to hear back from multiple people. So it turned out to be an easy conversation. So there's no right answer to that. But the fact that that person said, hey, this is happening, I'm not comfortable with it, it was magic to see.
And so here's another hot take. Conflict is like fish or house guests. If you let it hang around for too long, it gets really nasty.
I like it, Mike.
I love it. The other bit, again, shared language, working agreements. Claudia, the example of, yes, say there's acknowledge and then wait, but when the time comes to engage, any model that allows for healthy communication, the evidence, inference, impact model, there's all that stuff. People need to be either trained or guided in that method of communication so that there's a chance at resolution or de-escalation at least.
Yeah. So, and another kind of heuristic to keep that I find helpful to keep in mind is in some conflict, there's a need for just a little bit of ventilation. So sometimes the participants need a moment to vent, just to say what's on their mind, bring the emotion up from inside and get it out. The trick to that is keeping it from escalating and also keeping it from turning into a drive in their BMW, which means bitching, moaning, and whining.
Oh,
But sometimes just a little bit of ventilation. Okay, I can get that off my chest. Then I'm out of that emotional reactive realm, and then I'm open to understanding another perspective.
love the 3-day rule.
Yeah.
If you don't address it, it comes back. There was a wonderful book. God, I don't know if I can find it, but I'll put it in the show notes. It's called Putting Moose Heads on the Table. It's by a Swedish group. We talk about at least in the US, I don't know if India has these similar, the elephant in the room, the thing that nobody wants to talk about. Well, they've taken it to another level because apparently what happens in where they live, moose, when they die, they're big creatures and they stink. And so their metaphor is the moose head on the table. The longer it sits, the worse it gets. And the flies come buzzing it. It stinks. And it's worse than the fish 3 days old because it's as big as a moose head. And so
It's got its own website.
does it?
Yeah, that's reminding me, and I have no idea where I heard this, but don't let it fester.
Don't let it fester.
So all of this is also raising for me, know when you need a moderator, because can the people have, so whoever is in this conflict, in this drama, can they have the conversation on their own, or do they need a moderator?
Mm.
And then if I'm the team coach or if I'm the outside person that's on the in, do I feel that I'm able to be that moderator? Can I stay neutral enough to where I can help these people have this conversation?
Mm.
So I
Good
think that's a
point.
good question. I know that I've come up with this with some of my co-coaches is I know I'm too opinionated on this topic to be able to moderate this conversation. And I've got too many strong opinions or too many thoughts on what should happen and who's right and who's wrong. So too much judgment to be able to be the moderator. So can I be the person moderating if they need an outside person?
Mm.
That's where having a professional coach at your disposal can be very useful. Shameless plug.
Yep.
Somebody who's good with conflict. Well, I know I had so somebody who was a manager came to me saying, I don't like conflict. I just don't have time for it, and I've got a very strong opinion, but I do need to be the one to have this conversation with these two people because they are my team members. So he needed help figuring out how to have this conversation, and we we outlined the conversation, we practiced, and reminded himself. So, how are you going to catch yourself judging? Or how are you going to catch yourself maybe siding with one person or the other, or trying to give your solution? Because that was that was the way that it could have gone had he not had the intelligence of saying, hey, I know that I've got these thoughts and this is the way that I want to solve it, but I know that that's not going to be a real solution. I want these two people to have the conversation. So had he not done that, it would have gone a certain way, and walked through it on how did he manage himself, but also how did he give these people space. And it was giving each person space to talk while the other listened. So absolutely no chiming in. And there were a bunch of little tips and tricks in there, but I think helping him figure out how to be the moderator and keep himself out of it or keep his opinion out, and helping provide a space to speak and a space to listen was really helpful. It ended up being a really good conversation that I wish I could have been a fly on the wall, but it didn't go that way.
We need to cue the applause track. I mean, coaches need coaches too. And you did a powerful thing there, Claudia. And I bet you sooner or later, the two people that were experiencing conflict will learn to communicate and resolve it without a moderator. But
Mm.
setting them loose without that moderator could have been disastrous.
Oh, it
Without
was.
without that,
That's why it got there.
coached moderator. Yeah. Oh, what a wonderful conversation. MG,
Yeah.
what else is on your mind? Is there something that we could touch on that we haven't yet?
I think we touched upon all of them, and I think we touched upon a little bit on the tools, and I think I would say rather techniques and tools or whatever you call them. But then, yes, there's no one stop place or one size fits all, right? So not that one tool can help to navigate through this, or if you now that we know that we are here, what's next? So you have your working agreements, you have your shared goals. What else? Educating. I'm just trying to rephrase. Am I missing something? Anything else?
Curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good one.
yeah, curiosity. Ventilating. We talked about ventilation. We talked
Yep.
about moderation. What else?
Or the BMW. I'm going to keep that one, Mike. Why is he talking to us about cars?
I hadn't heard that one before. I've heard it in the context
I
of the
haven't.
BMW retro. They're like, oh, you mean like the sailboat retro? You're driving a BMW? No, 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 no.
I heard that. I picked that up from a book titled No Ego by Cy Wakeman. It's about reality-based leadership.
Okay.
10 out of 10 recommend.
Got lots of things to read. Well, I hope this gives you, MG, some hope about your and your team's ability to handle whatever you want to call it, conflict, problem solving, whatever comes your way.
Being human.
Being human. Yeah.
Being human is nice. Yeah, being genuine and being human is nice. So we are all at conflicts internally also. I'm at conflict at times, most of the times. Should I do this or should I not? And then you know how it goes, right? So and then I choose something in between. So yeah, I think it was lovely. And yeah, I think one last question. So, but then we could take it off, meaning off the recording or.
And the after party.
Oh, we like to leave the recording on for the after party just in case it's really good, because 4 times out of 5 we've stopped and then the real podcast begins and we're like, damn, I'm not going to remember any of that. So we'll do the formal close. Thank you if you made it this far. You're clearly interested in the topic, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on the ideas and how you're managing conflict. See the show notes for a link to our Discord server where you can join the conversation, and it is a bad conflict-free Discord, I'm happy to say. We've not kicked anybody else. We've had no moderation. I mean, maybe we should raise the bar or lower the bar. I forget.
MG, thank you for bringing this topic to the surface and for inspiring this podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And with that, the Agile Uprising formally signing out. Stick around for the after show. Yeah,
Yeah.
so right, so here we are back again because we had more thoughts after we stopped recording. So we didn't talk about the impact of hybrid teams, fully remote teams, cross-cultural teams. We touched on a little bit, but when some people are in the room and some people are on the camera, boy, conflict is tough.
Or when some people are in the room virtually, but there's no camera and you can still feel the tension.
Right? So that's huge. And then the other thing that we don't talk all that much about are cultural differences, right? In some
Oh, you don't talk
societies,
about, I see it every day. So
well,
we're
you
deep
see it
in
every
it.
day, but we didn't talk about it. So, you've got people from different backgrounds where conflict is to be avoided at all costs. Disagreement, in public is avoided, but there's always the after party where you have the real conversations. And so there are also things that come to play.
Mm. I think I can talk about a little bit of culture or the culture aspect because I've seen culture does play a role or critical role, I would say, in conflict navigation. I would say navigation, not conflict arising, but navigation, because once it has arisen, how do you navigate is the major chunk, or it takes the major chunk of your time, right? So I think how do you have conversations with people from different culture? It should come in the working agreement. People don't talk about it, but it should be there
Right.
somehow. Yeah, yeah. And I feel that why isn't there? I don't know. I think we're in 21st century. You're going to. I don't know why you're not talking about it because we're so globally connected now, right? So now that I'm connected with all of you, right? So we're globally connected. We must talk about it. I haven't. I don't know how to do this, but then probably working agreement is the best place because you cannot have it all in one place. But that's the only place I see for now. Yeah, yeah.
I know that I see it very regularly because, well, there's one team that I work with. They're the complete melting pot. So they've got people on the team that are German, so very direct. French, also direct, sometimes snarky, but it's not meant to be offensive. It's just the way that it is. And people that are in India who like to first listen before they speak up, or who won't necessarily address things in public. They don't air their dirty laundry out in public. So, how do you have a team conversation, team conflict conversation with people who would much rather address it face to face or not address it at all?
It's so complicated.
It is. But if you bring it up and you say, hey, you're human, right? We were talking about earlier, it's just human. This is going to happen. There are going to be times where you are going to disagree. So if you just bring it up and how would I disagree? How would you disagree? And how am I going to interpret it? So if I don't like things being very forward and somebody that I work with is going to be very forward, then how do I want to react, or how do I want that person to adapt to me, and how am I going to adapt to that person as well? So I think just having the conversation when you're not in it is also very helpful for knowing afterwards, okay, right now we are in it. So and so doesn't like things to be direct. So and so wants to have it out. What do we want to do with this right now? Okay, right now I want to have it out, but I can give that person space. So I'll duke it out with this other person, or I'll go vent to this other person while so and so goes and takes a breather.
There's an added complexity when there's employees and contractors in the situation. And I've never seen that addressed well in a working agreement. If somebody's on a contract basis, they tend, by and large, and this is overgeneralization, to be adverse to conflict. You want me to do it that way? I'll do it that way. I might have a different way to solve that problem, but hey, it's your money. That's a working group, not a team.
I like that. I like it, Andy. I think this is again very nuanced. I would say that given my experience working also in hybrid teams of late, I feel and I see and hear, again, I'm using those three things, right? So I would say that education is very important, right? When
Yeah.
I heard Claudia saying that she has worked in this multicultural, diverse teams with different aspects of how they have been brought up and the kind of society come from. I think educating is very important because everybody doesn't read too much, right? How it works, right? Uh, a typical person would just be knowing his or her stuff or technical stuff, right? So they not be reading the cultural stuff. So who is going to do this education? What's the source of education? I would say that's the question, right? And how much would you educate them? Too much of information also is like, okay, come on, push, push, push. And then till what end, right? So just enough is what I feel is needed.
Teams have to learn along the way, and
Mhm.
too often they focus on technical practices or framework
Mhm.
practices, and these quote soft skills don't get enough love.
Yes.
Yeah, but I also see the way that I see these things happening is they tend, I think this was actually my initial response to you, MG, as well, was it's brought by a scrum master, by a team coach, by whomever, as a workshop.
Mhm.
And a lot of reactions that I see to, oh God, not another workshop. Like, especially not another workshop that's not about work. So if you've got one of those teams, then it's probably best to have snippet conversations. So, okay, hey, we didn't talk about communication. How do we want to communicate? So give it in bite-sized chunks so that it's not like the whole thing, or it's not a 2 hour let's figure it out, especially if you're with teams who don't like something that they might interpret as touchy feeling. So,
Mm. Yeah.
so give it in the right doses. So coming back to what you were saying, give it in the right dose.
That's
And that
nice. I
might
think
be a
I could.
2 hour
Yeah.
workshop, or it might be a 5 minute conversation.
Yeah.
Find it out, I would say, right? Find it out what's
Yeah.
the perfect thing. Just go and see
Figure
it.
out your dosage.
Yeah. Like a
Yeah.
doctor does, right? So, yeah.
And each patient will be different. Each scenario will be different.
Yes.
Well, thank you, MG, and thank you, Claudia.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. Thank
We'll
you
see
so
you
much,
along the
Andy
way.
and Claudia.
All
It
right.
was enriching for me. It was very
Same.
nice and enriching and seeing you all.
We'll do it
Yeah.
again sometime.
Hey, Kyle, pick up that kazoo in there. What am I to do with you? We're broken down at 6 years old, with hammers at my throat and visits to the hospital. broken. We have a new kazoo player here with us tonight. His name's Kyle Burris. He is the DJ of this show that you're listening to right now. Kyle, would you care to do a little kazoo solo?
The kazoo's actually busted.
It's not busted. It's not busted. You just get stage fright. Oh, that sounds great, boy. Oh yeah. Let me bring out the chorus. It's all right. Oh, what am I to do with you when you're broken down? Kazoo is in the other realm. Oh no. Let go from this. The trash can flies and swore that uplift and only metal institution. I started bothering this. Oh, a band in town. A band in town. A band in town. Wow, 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 wow. Shall we do the chorus on this one? All right, 1, 2, 3.